Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Ashtodhara Sada Shri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Ashtodhara Sada Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Naam Acharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem Sikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopi Goshyama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana ki jai. Shri Mathura Vrindavana Dhama ki jai. Shri Navadvip Mayapur Dhama ki jai. Jagannath Puri Dhama ki jai. Ganga Mayi ki jai. Yamuna Mayi ki jai. Tulasi Devi ki jai. Bhakti Devi ki jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Okay, so today I'd like to read from Srimad Bhagavad-gītā. For any of you who don't know what Bhagavad-gītā is, maybe everybody here does, probably, but for anybody who doesn't, Bhagavad-gītā is a 5,000-year-old spiritual text from India, which basically talks about, basically like the basics of spiritual knowledge, understanding who we are in relation to this world, understanding, also what this world is, understanding who we are in relation to Krishna, etc. So I'd like to read a verse from there. Before we do that, if you could all repeat after me. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Excuse me. Okay, so for anybody who wants to follow along on their phones or something, we're reading from Bhagavad-gītā, text, chapter 4, text number 2. So I'll just chant the Sanskrit myself and then read the translation and commentary. Evam parampara praptam imam rajarshayo viduhu sakaleneha mahata yogo nashta parantapa. This supreme science was thus received through the chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. But in course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science as it is appears to be lost. Commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. It is clearly stated that the Gita was especially meant for the saintly kings because they were to execute its purpose in ruling over the citizens. Certainly, Bhagavad-gītā was never meant for the demoniac or the, you could say, evil persons who would dissipate its value for no one's benefit and would devise all types of interpretations according to personal whims. As soon as the original purpose was scattered by the motives of the unscrupulous commentators, there arose the need to re-establish the disciplic succession. 5,000 years ago, it was detected by the Lord Himself that the disciplic succession was broken, and therefore He declared that the purpose of the Gita appeared to be lost. In the same way, at the present moment also, there are so many editions of the Gita, especially in English. But almost all of them are not according to authorized disciplic succession. There are innumerable interpretations rendered by different mundane scholars, but almost all of them do not accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, although they make a good business on the words of Sri Krishna. This spirit is demoniac, or evil, because demons, or evil people, do not believe in God, but simply enjoy the property of the Supreme. Since there is a great need of an edition of the Gita in English, as it is received by the parampara, the disciplic succession, an attempt is made herewith to fulfill this great want. Bhagavad-gītā, accepted as it is a great boon to humanity. But if it is accepted as a treatise of philosophical speculations, it is simply a waste of time. So I'll just say a couple prayers, offering respects to my spiritual teacher. Om Ajnana-timirandasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Ladita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, Hare Krishna, everybody. Thank you very much for coming today on Easter Sunday. So, I would like to speak a little bit, vaguely related to Easter Sunday, I guess. I'm not going to talk about Christianity because I don't know much about Christianity, frankly speaking. But yeah, so Easter is a very, very widely celebrated holiday. It's the day that Jesus resurrected. So he was crucified, and then I think it was 3 days later, he came back to life. So it's a very important holiday, especially, in Christian countries such as this one, America. It's a very important holiday for Christians. It's kind of like Janmashtami for Vaishnavas, the appearance day of Krishna. One thing that we can learn from Easter, not necessarily in like a direct sense, but in kind of like an indirect way, is the importance of keeping knowledge pure and keeping the transmission of knowledge pure for the benefit of generations to come. So, originally Easter, like I said, is it's a holiday which is it's a religious holiday, really. It's a holiday which is celebrating holiday, actually, literally holy. It's a holy day. It's a time for remembering. For Christians, they remember Jesus' teachings. They worship Jesus in different ways according to their particular denomination of Christianity. And it's a time for prayer and studying the Bible, reading the Bible, etc. But nowadays, we see most Easter celebrations don't really have anything to do with that. Most Easter celebrations we have the Easter Bunny, and the Easter Bunny, Easter egg hunts, and I grew up in my family is from Europe. So in Europe, instead of plastic eggs, there's like real eggs, and so you like hard-boiled eggs. By the way, we're not into that. We're not into eggs. We don't eat eggs. Vaishnavas don't. So growing up on Easter, there was this game we would play where you'd have a bunch of hard-boiled eggs, and they were dyed different colors. And then so somebody would take an egg and hold it like this in their hand with just like some little part showing. And then another person would take their egg and then, hit it like that. And so whoever egg cracks, they lose. And then so we'd have that game. We'd all play with eggs, and we'd try to find the strongest egg, and then somebody would find whatever. While it might be fun, it might be entertaining, it might be a time for, bonding with the family, it doesn't really have anything to do with the original meaning of the holiday. Most people nowadays, when they celebrate Easter, they don't really celebrate Easter. They just kind of have these games and like that. Another example of this, I think a much more gross example, is St. Patrick's Day. St. Patrick's Day. If anybody knows the history of St. Patrick's Day, I didn't until I looked it up, this recent St. Patrick's Day. St. Patrick was a Christian saint. I think he was Catholic. And he was enslaved. I think he was British, but he was enslaved in Ireland. He was kidnapped and enslaved in Ireland, and then he escaped. But out of his compassion, he went back to Ireland in order to, of course, some people might not see this as so compassionate. This is kind of a controversial form of compassion. But anyway, his intention was to help the people of Ireland, particularly like the pagan people of Ireland, by giving them Christianity. Again, you can assess for yourself whether you think that's compassionate or not. Some people might not think so. But his intention was to help them. And the clover he used to explain the Trinity. You have the three leaves of the clover, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. And so that was that's how he got through to them. Which, makes me wonder where the four-leaf clover came from. Because that's a big thing on St. Patrick's Day. But nowadays, what's St. Patrick's Day? St. Patrick's Day is basically a day where people dress up. They dress up as leprechauns for some reason. And they drink a lot. St. Patrick's Day is basically known for drinking, which, has nothing to do with St. Patrick. And you'll see even on like billboards sometimes they'll call St. Patrick, call him like St. Patty. So you can imagine if we're talking about like Ramanujacharya or something like that, it's Ramanujacharya's appearance day. And we say, hey, it's Ramanuji's appearance day. It doesn't show that we have very much respect, for the actual person who's being celebrated, to call them some silly nickname. So things in this world have a tendency to degrade as time goes on. Just like this verse is talking about how the knowledge of the Bhagavad-gītā at a certain point was lost. Like the second part of this verse, Sakale nehamata yoga nashta parantapa. That just in course of time, the disciplic succession was broken, and the knowledge within Bhagavad-gītā was practically lost. So why does this happen within spiritual traditions? Why does this happen within religions? Largely, it's because of a lack of understanding of how to properly receive knowledge and to understand the absolute truth. Jiva Goswami, for those of you who know him, if you don't, he's a very great saint within our tradition, Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. And he wrote this basically philosophical treatise, 6-part philosophical treatise called the Shat Sandarbhas, which basically, from the very beginning of knowledge, starting with who we are and what this world is, to the very end of knowledge, describing in great detail Krishna and the absolute truth. You can actually, if you go, I just found this out today, if you go to Banaras Hindu University in India, in Varanasi, you can get a PhD in the Shat Sandarbhas. You went there? To Banaras? Okay, well, very nice. We have an alumnus in the room. So anyway, so he describes, within those Sandarbhas, he describes 4 defects that the living entities or that the souls have within this mature world. One of them is the propensity to cheat, meaning that we have the propensity to cheat others for some personal gain. The second one is the tendency to become illusioned, means to accept something which is not true, which has no basis in reality. Like, for example, an insane person may walk around and say, I am Napoleon, and the ruler of France, and anyway. But it has no basis in reality whatsoever. It's actually just complete illusion. And also the tendency to make mistakes, to overlook certain details in a particular situation. And imperfect senses, meaning senses that can only perceive so much. Like, for example, I know what's going on in this room, for the most part. I don't even know everything that's going on in this room, truthfully. But I don't know what's going on the other side of this wall, or I don't know what's going on the other side of this wall, or upstairs, or wherever. My senses are limited. So these 4 defects that the living being has make it practically impossible to understand any kind of, you could say like real, substantial knowledge in relation to God or in relation to spirit, things which are outside of the material nature. So then it begs the question, how is one to understand the absolute truth? How is one to understand God? How is one to understand Krishna? Our spiritual teacher, Srila Prabhupada, in one place, he says that understanding, you're going to like this. I liked it when I heard it. Understanding comes from standing under. And this is a principle that applies in basically all aspects of life, even material life. For example, if you want to get a job, it's not that you just go to that place. You hear about that the position's open, and you just walk into the place and you sit down at the desk and you just start working. Or you go to the interview and you kick the door down and you say, "It's time for you to give me this job." You know, you can't force your way in. The method for getting the job is that you have to go there and you have to present yourself nicely, humbly, and you have to kind of schmooze the person. You know, you have to please them, because they're in the position of control, and you have no control basically over whether you get the job or not. I mean, you may try certain things, but you really have no control. It ultimately rests on the person who is offering the job, whether he lets you have it. So similarly, if one wants to realize God, if one wants to have spiritual realization, one has to be very humble. And Arjuna, in the Bhagavad-gītā, there's one text in the 2nd chapter. In the beginning of the Bhagavad-gītā, Arjuna was making, he was giving different arguments, and actually very philosophically grounded arguments for why he shouldn't fight in this war that's going on. But at one point, he realizes that he can't really figure it out on his own. He can't really understand what's really going on. And Krishna basically tells him that. And so at one point, there's a shift in his relationship with Krishna. He's speaking to Krishna in the Bhagavad-gītā. And it's this verse, he says, Karpanya dosho pahata svabhava prichami tvam dharma samurdha chetaha yat shayasyan nishitam bruhitan me shishyasteham shadi mam tvam prapannam. He says, in effect, I don't know what's going on. I'm confused. I have no ability to understand what's going on. Therefore, I'm asking you, I'm surrendering to you, actually, he says. You're my guru, I'm your disciple. Just tell me what I need to do. I can't figure it out for myself. Just tell me what's good for me. He says, Yat shreyasyan nishchitam bruhi tanme shishyasteham shadimam tvam prapannam. So this is seen within the Vedic tradition as the main qualification for receiving spiritual knowledge, humility. One has to be humble. And this humility, it's not weakness, it's not low self-esteem, it's not like a crippling kind of thing. It's not that, oh, I can't understand anything, I'm such a loser, I'm such an idiot, may as well just give it all up, I'm just, whatever. That's not humility. That's something else. Real humility is just a sober acknowledgement of our limitations, an acknowledgement that I don't know everything, an acknowledgement that I am not the center of everything, that there are people who know more than me, there is something beyond me in this world. So this is humility, and it's actually very intelligent. Many people actually, especially in Western culture, see humility as a weakness, or as a as a weakness. Especially this culture in America. America was basically founded on individualism, on the fact that I'm in charge of my own destiny. Whatever I want, I can achieve. Which, fine, but one should acknowledge that we have some limitations, because we do. And we see this humility in even the greatest of personalities. In fact, basically, the greater the personality, the more humble they are. For example, I gave the example of Arjuna, but also one devotee in our tradition, Sanatana Goswami, he presented himself, although he was extremely learned in Shastra, or in Scripture, and he had a very high position in society. When he met Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was Krishna come again 500 years ago, he met Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and the first thing he spoke to him, he said, "Ke ami," which in Bengali means, "Who am I? I don't know who I am. I don't know why I'm suffering in this world. Please instruct me." And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu very greatly praised this humility. And similarly, Srila Prabhupada came to America on the order of his spiritual master, on the order of his teacher, in 1965. And he was 69 years old, which is not young. And on the way here, he had 2 heart attacks. He was riding on a cargo ship, on just some room in a cargo ship. He had 2 heart attacks on the boat ride, which was it was like a month-long boat ride or something like that. And he got to America, and he said, later, he said, "I didn't know whether to turn left or right." He had no connections, he had no money. All he had was the order of his guru and a trunk full of books that he had written, specifically Srimad Bhagavatam, for those who know it. And in a poem that he wrote just 4 days before he landed in America, although he's, we can see now he was an extremely elevated personality. He has to be very elevated, or else how could he have spread Krishna consciousness all over the world? He said, "I am the most fallen. I have no qualification whatsoever." And he prayed, he said, "Krishna, I don't know why you've brought me here, but you have, so therefore you must have some business here. So anyway, I'm like a puppet in your hands. If you so desire, you can make me dance." So he acknowledged. Of course, Srila Prabhupada's not an ordinary soul like us, but he was playing the part of an ordinary soul in order to instruct us that we should acknowledge that we have some limitation. It's not just that we can understand everything for ourselves. Like knowledge, for instance, knowledge doesn't just mean information. It's not just that by reading Bhagavad-gītā. I mean, you can read Bhagavad-gītā a million times. You can read it every day for the rest of your life. But without sincerity and without guidance, it's impossible for any kind of spiritual knowledge to enter into your heart. And it's impossible for you to realize it. In fact, knowledge without just information, knowledge without realization, it's really just a mental exercise. It doesn't really do anything for you other than, I mean, it can sharpen your brain, but in the end, it doesn't really help you, actually. Even if you're reading Bhagavad-gītā, even if you're reading Srimad Bhagavatam, even if you're reading whatever it is, it won't help you unless you have sincerity and unless you have guidance. And this sincerity comes with spiritual practice. It's not just that one becomes a bookworm and then understands the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the absolute truth. One has to, like I mentioned, have humility, and then also at the same time have determination in spiritual practice. There's this verse in Bhagavad-gītā, that says, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti te. Krishna says that for those who endeavor with faith and determination, constantly trying to understand me, he says, to those people, I give them the understanding by which they can come closer to me. So we simultaneously have to be learned. That's there. It's not that we just reject any. We're not blind followers. We should be learned, but at the same time we have to be faithful. We have to be humble and try to serve the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita. Try to serve the teachers who are presenting the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, and approach them with humility. There's another verse in Bhagavad Gita, Tad vidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnanena tattvadarshinaha. That those who have seen knowledge, or those who have realized knowledge, who are tattvadarshis, means those who have understood the truth, who have seen the truth, those people can bestow knowledge upon others, because they've seen it, because they've realized it. Without having knowledge, I mean, you can only really give as much as you have. Without having knowledge, you can't really give it to others. And so therefore, one is enjoined to serve them, means serving their instructions by hearing them and applying them into our life. Pariprashanena seva, and inquire from those great souls. So this is the real process of understanding knowledge. And this chanting of Hare Krishna, this process of chanting Hare Krishna, it's an acknowledgement that I need help, that I can't do everything on my own. So when one actually comes to the point of inquiring into the absolute truth, he realizes that, yeah, I can't do this on my own. Because Krishna, or really whatever conception of the absolute truth you have, is beyond this material world. It's beyond the material senses, it's beyond the material mind, it's outside of our range of perception. So we can only perceive it, we can only understand it to the extent that we're purified of our material desires, of our material conditioning. We have to see beyond that. Because philosophy, just having philosophy, just having, kind of book knowledge, without spiritual purification, it becomes influenced by desire. Or whatever philosophical conceptions we have become influenced by our desires. Therefore, for example, like St. Patrick's Day. St. Patrick's Day was a Christian holiday, just like Easter. But because it wasn't passed down with spiritual purity, it became contaminated by the desires of the masses to get together and drink lots of alcohol. Which, yeah, it's not good. And so therefore, one in their own personal lives should keep themselves very philosophically pure, and at all times be endeavoring for spiritual purity. Purity of the heart means getting rid of the contaminations of material desire, means selfish desires, and anger, and greed, and all of these different things. And the main way to do this, in the sages emphasized that one should chant the holy name of Krishna, this Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Because the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, it's non-different from Krishna. Krishna is the absolute truth, he's completely spiritual, and so therefore everything in relation to him is non-different from him. So if one chants the holy name, if one chants Krishna's names, then he's actually present there. It's a spiritual sound vibration. It's not like any kind of material name. So if one chants the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, then one is actually put in direct association with Krishna, with the Supreme Absolute Truth. And when one associates with that vibration often, frequently, every day, then gradually we start to, like there's this verse in Srimad Bhagavatam, Shrinvatam Swagata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hridyantyasto Hyabadrani Vidunoti Suhritsatam. That when one hears spiritual sound vibration, which is pure, then Krishna, who is the soul of all souls, who resides within the heart of all living entities, he personally, he becomes pleased. He becomes happy that the living entity, or whoever, is hearing about him and is making an endeavor to come closer to him. So he personally cleanses the heart of all unwanted things and brings the soul closer to him. So, yeah, to recap, we should have humility and sincerity and determination in spiritual practice so that we can become spiritually pure and be able to truly imbibe the message of Bhagavad Gita and truly imbibe the message of Srimad Bhagavatam and of the Vedic literatures in general, so that, the tradition of knowledge doesn't become lost. And it can be passed down for the benefit of generations to come, and also for the benefit of the generation already present. So, there's another verse actually I'll quote, because it's a nice verse. There's a verse that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself composed that says, Trinadapi suni chena turorapi sahishnuna amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari. That one who thinks himself, lower than a blade of grass and is more tolerant than a tree, and thinks that all praise belongs to others, means is always ready to praise others but never wants to accept praise for himself. Such a person can truly chant Krishna's names at all times. So it's been brought up before, that how can one be more tolerant than a tree? Or how can one be more humble than a blade of grass? Because a tree, you think about a tree tolerates everything. People go up to the tree and they'll carve their name in it, or whatever, if there's a storm or something like that. The tree stands out in the cold, doesn't say anything. The tree is always ready to offer its shade or its fruit to anybody who comes. And even if you're cutting down the tree doesn't say anything. But one should be more tolerant than a tree, because unlike a tree, as human beings, we can say something. If something's happening to us, if somebody is, whatever, attacking us, of course you can defend yourself if somebody's attacking you, but speaking badly about us, or doing whatever, trying to bring us down, then even though we could say something, unlike a tree, we actually could say something, but still we don't. We just tolerate it, and we see it as a part of Krishna's arrangement to purify us. And similarly with a blade of grass, people step all over a blade of grass, and it's on the floor. It's at the lowest point of wherever. So a blade of grass is never desiring to be on top, is never desiring to be the best. So similarly, we also shouldn't. And in this way, we can truly have spiritual realization and perfect our human form of life, which is meant for spiritual realization. So I will stop there, and if there's any questions or comments, discussion, etc., objections, perhaps.
You're not supposed to object.
Radhanath Swami was here a few years ago, and he had traveled to the redwood forests here in California, and he noticed that these trees, they stand for so long, and they've survived forest fires, and you could see by their trunks where they've been scorched by these forest fires and still remain alive. So you can just imagine, the tolerance of those ancient trees. We should be that tolerant.
Yeah. I think he also mentions about the redwood trees. They're extremely tall, very, very, very tall, but their roots are really shallow. So it doesn't take much knowledge of physics. If you don't have a very stable foundation, or if you don't have a very strong foundation, but you build very much on top of it, then it's liable to fall over. So how do the redwood trees stay, standing? Their roots actually, they form a network. They connect and they hold each other up. So in a similar way, one should also try as much as possible to associate with those who are spiritually minded, so that they can be encouraged in spiritual life. And it makes it much easier to stay strong and to stay standing in spiritual life. So, thank you. Yes?
Please use the microphone. Thank you.
I think you gave a quite glimpse about the pranipatena tattvadarshinaha pranipatena sevaya. So in concern with that, what does, I think just you might have read, what does Bhagavatam talks about the qualities of such devotees?
Yeah.
Or as you said, those are the qualified in order to...
Yeah. So the qualities of, how does one recognize somebody who's truly...
In a true way.
Say again?
In Kali Yuga, in a true way.
Yeah, so how does one realize, or how does one recognize a person who has real spiritual realization? Well, one way, there's a couple different ways, and I'll talk about a couple different. One way is that he is purely presenting what is stated by Krishna in Bhagavad-gītā and in different places. There's this verse, Achanoti shasrartam acare sthapayantipi svayam acharate yasmad acharyastena kirtataha. That one who is an acharya, or one who is a great teacher, he understands thoroughly the statements of the Shastras, or the Vedic texts, and he explains them to others, he teaches them to others. Acharya sthapayantipi. Svayam acharate yasmad. And then simultaneously he practices them himself. He applies them in his own life. And so then acharyastena kirtataha. That person is called an acharya. So practically what that looks like is somebody who doesn't have any personal desire, doesn't have any desire to, you could say, to enjoy this world for themselves, or they don't have any selfish desire to be the center, or to be to be some great big guru or something like that, a big teacher, and get a bunch of disciples. And I mean, they may have many disciples, but they don't relish being somebody who has a bunch of followers or something like that. They're very humble. And then simultaneously, they have a great attraction or attachment to Krishna, to hearing about Krishna, speaking about Krishna, chanting Krishna's names, and like this. So there should be a transformation of their character, in the sense that they have no attraction for the material world, just enjoying the material world, but simultaneously they have a great attraction for engaging in Krishna consciousness.
So one of the things you stated, like they can state it from Bhagavatam very clearly, and having a devotional service, transcendental transformations, and it doesn't have to be necessarily that they have a great disciples or in a big ashrams, and all those things are not important. Rather than that, their spirituality, their spiritual platforms could appear.
Yeah. And they also, like Prabhupada's mentioning in this purport, they also should come in an authorized disciplic succession, or an authorized...
that's one of the most important too, right?
Yeah, in an authorized line of teachers. So this Bhagavad-gītā was passed down from Krishna himself. He spoke it to Arjuna. And then there was a series of teachers, an unbroken line of teachers that one guru passed it to his disciple, who passed it to his disciple, who passed it to his disciple, etc. And in that way, the knowledge stays pure. So it's not just that you have, some guy who comes up and just, I read, whatever, he has no guru himself, or he has no disciplic succession. He just appears out of nowhere, and all of a sudden he's, God, or he's, the Jagat Guru, the Acharya, the guru of the whole world, or something like that. There's many people like that who, they just pop up, and they're all, all of a sudden they're Jagat Guru.
Yeah, they continue sometime, and some disciples break. They cannot follow that succession, in fact.
So there's spiritual strength with this, which is transmitted through authorized disciplic successions. And so one should also see that. In fact, one should probably especially see that.
Yeah.
So, is that an okay answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. There you go.
Prabhuji, while it may be said that one should be tolerant and humble, and one should do all these things, the reality is that that's not easy for most of us. And we struggle with our own ego and our mind, and it wants to be number one. It doesn't want to be like a blade of grass. And we do feel insulted and hurt and angry and upset when somebody says something offensive to us. So how to overcome that, and how to actually bring ourselves to that place of humility that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu talks about?
Yeah. So this verse that I quoted, Trinadapi Sunichena Tarorapi Sahishnana Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari, that one should be more tolerant than a tree, think himself more humble than a blade of grass, and in that way he can chant Krishna's names at all times. So that verse actually works both ways. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur describes that if one wants to be humble, then he should always chant Krishna's names. Because when one chants Krishna's names and meditates upon Krishna, he thinks about, Krishna, and how Krishna's in control of everything, and how Krishna is all powerful, and how Krishna is so great. And so it's hard for one to be proud when you realize how small you are, in relation to the absolute truth. So one should always, engage in hearing and chanting about Krishna, and in this way we can, realize how small we are. Just like if you go outside, and you may be, at night, specifically if you go outside at night, and you may be engaged in so many activities, but if you look up at the sky, and you think about, there's all these stars, all these planets, and how small you are, and how big the universe is, you really get a sense of how small you are.
So, on top of that, I also find that how fragile we are.
Yeah, exactly.
I was just coming from the hospital right now to meet someone, and just temperature a little bit here or there, oxygen level a little here or there, and suddenly we are seriously ill, or we are in terrible condition, or even dying.
Yeah.
So they monitor every moment just to see in the hospital. But yes, how that fragility, and you step out and something hits you, and boom.
Yeah.
That's it. So
yeah, so one should always keep things in proper perspective. Is that okay? Answer? Okay, thank you.
Anyone else with a question or comment?
I have a little hobby that I do. I see someone professing to be a guru on Facebook, because I'm not cool enough to be on Instagram. But so then I'll just Google them. And what I'll type in is, what does so-and-so say about Krishna? And then, usually it's just not something wonderful, And just every time. So what they are really is, they're like life coaches. They're like people that give you advice on how to deal with life. Material world, disease, anxiety, stress, different issues, I don't know, racism, this thing, that thing. They're like life coaches. They're counselors. And then you ask them something spiritual, like, oh, so what's the goal of life? What's the end game? Where do we go after the time of death? Oh, you merge. Every single one of them, you merge. You just want to become one with Krishna, or you'll realize that you are Krishna, or So they have very little spiritual quality or message. But everyone's calling them a guru, and they're building hospitals and schools, and they're hugging people, and they say all these wonderful things that sound nice, but none of it's getting spirit soul out of the material world.
Yeah, Prabhupada would say, there's so many people professing to be Jagat Guru, or the guru of the whole universe, but they've never even left their village in India. So my guru also, he's a disciple of Srila Prabhupada. Before he came in touch with Srila Prabhupada, he was on a boat. He's from Britain, but he was on a boat between Britain and Ireland. He was reading this book, and he said he was liking the book. He said he thought it was intelligent. He thought it was philosophical. And he got to the end, and in the end, the end he was talking about basically the conclusion of the philosophy. And then he said, yeah. And so then we all merge into the white light and everything, And he said he threw the book off the boat into the sea. So, yeah. Anyway. I think Aditya has something.
I was watching a video of this person who's very famous, a lot of followers, and just Jagat Guru. And there's a video where he talks about the purpose of life, and somebody asks him, what's the purpose of life? And then he says that there is no purpose of life. If you get too caught up in the purpose of life, you will forget to live. And it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
But these people have just millions and millions of followers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything is Maya, including Krishna.
Okay, so if there's nothing else.
All right, so thank you to Amogha Lila.